Hi, my name's Lisa Overton, and I'm going to give you a short introduction to Practice Notes on Designing for Change, my short paper number 124 for ServDes 2020. I would like to begin by acknowledging that this video was made on the unceded lands of the Boonwurrung language group peoples of the Eastern Kulin Nations. I pay my respect to their elders past and present, and to the elders of other First Nations peoples watching this video. One of the things that came to me very early on in a practice as a service designer was the fact that I almost never designed services. In fact, I'd go so far that service designers generally seldom ever design a service. What we do is we redesign them. That's where organisations have evolved services over time that really aren't working for them, and they bring in the designers to see what can be made different. For me, it's become clear in my practice that the most critical element of successfully implementing any of my designs is actually not the craft of designing so much as the craft of steering people through change. So that's very much now where I find myself focusing. An observation that I've seen across many different projects and types of environments is that the conditions that actually create the need for change drive a tension between the people who need to engage with that change. And by that I mean that there's usually some catalyst, whether it's an external force from a regulator or a market or competitors, or whether it's internal, that organisations are just reaching breaking points and need to pivot to do things differently. All the conditions that make this happen are really at odds with people being able to lean into creatively thinking and implementing change. I do like to reframe the concept of tensions as a balancing act, where we're trying to weigh up competing considerations to the right level of balance for any situation. What I have found working in government, in not-for-profit as well as in corporate sectors, that a real commonality is that this balance is profoundly out. Even as the frustration, anxiety is increasing, what it's doing is reducing the cognitive and the emotional capacity of people to do what needs to be done to successfully change out the way they operate and deliver services. Unfortunately, I've seen in my time organisations really try to throw capability and skill sets at people rather than investing on how do I rebuild their human capacity. And that indeed, I think, is one of the strengths of all human-centred design practices, is that we focus on the whole human and how we build them and equip them in ways to be sustainably creative and focused on outcome. In my own practice, for my personal life, and what has become quite important to me now professionally, is a set of compassion practices, the most prominent one being mindful self-compassion. There are three elements to mindful self-compassion. Firstly, there's self-kindness, and this is where we don't sit with judgment. Instead, we seek to understand what's going on in our context, which is really important when you want people to be able to engage with doing things differently and what isn't working and what has ceased to work for them. That absence of judgment is critical. The second element of mindful self-compassion is that of common humanity. That this discomfort, this suffering, this distress is something that everyone experiences. In fact, it's a thing that connects us to other people. It's not a thing that we experience on our own or in isolation. And this connection with other people through compassion is a critical element. The third piece is mindfulness. And this is where we hold the anxiety, the distress, all of that emotion in a balanced way so that we are not owned by it or pulled about by it in really unhelpful ways. The way that this comes in is really through more informal chats. It's not a big group conversation and it's not a skills training. It really is person-to-person interactions, often in a less formal way, and quite often actually outside of the typical place of work. What this does, and I found for me, is it's not just talking through ideas of how we can better implement change projects for new services. It's really about embodying that experience to create a visible experience for the people that I'm working with, which is particularly team leaders. And that looks at how they can experience someone seeking to understand what's going on with them without judgment, that they are looking at ways that this is a common thing and it's not something they're going through by themselves, and to also hold those negative and distressing conditions in a more balanced way. Once we've created that visceral experience, it becomes much easier to promulgate these practices in a more intentional way through an organisation, because people have an understanding and a really personal way about why it is so helpful. For these practice notes, what I really wanted to do was understand how other practitioners are incorporating compassion practices or perhaps empathy practices into their own practice, but also how they bring that into their projects in their workplace. If you'd like to explore some more about mindful self-compassion in particular ahead of the presentation at ServeDes, please go to self-compassion.org. You'll see that there's a great suite of resources there, including meditations and other activities, and it would be really interesting to know how that aligns or influences your own practice. Thank you.